I spent 5 years starving in a studio apartment while my family funded my brother's lavish lifestyle and mocked my useless ambition. But when they disinherited me at Thanksgiving dinner, they didn't realize the news channel behind them was about to announce my $100 million victory. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The betrayal didn't happen with a shout or a scream. It happened with the clinking of crystal and the soft, ambient jazz. My mother, Megan, insisted on playing whenever she wanted to pretend we were the perfect family. I was physically trembling, though I tried to mask it by gripping the stem of my water glass until my knuckles turned white. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. My body was running on a toxic cocktail of caffeine, adrenaline, and a lingering, bone-deep exhaustion that made the room spin slightly whenever I turned my head too fast. I looked terrible, and I knew it. My blazer was 3 years old, fraying slightly at the cuffs. My hair was pulled back in a messy, utilitarian bun because I hadn't had the time or the money for a salon visit in 6 months. To my family, I looked like exactly what they always said I was: a failure, a burnout, a woman pushing 30 who was still playing pretend with computers while the adults did real business. We were gathered in the drawing room of my parents' estate, a sprawling, colonial-style mansion that smelled of lemon polish and old money. The fire was crackling, casting long, dancing shadows against the mahogany bookshelves. It should have been cozy. Instead, it felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. "Olivia, are you even listening?" My father's voice cut through the fog in my brain. William sat in his high-backed leather wing chair, a glass of scotch resting on his knee. He looked every inch the titan of industry he believed himself to be, silver hair perfectly coiffed, a tailored suit that cost more than my entire year's rent. "I'm listening, Dad," I said, my voice raspy. "I'm just tired." "Tired?" he scoffed, exchanging a look with my mother, Megan, who was perched on the sofa, picking non-existent lint off her skirt. "You're always tired, Olivia. That's what happens when you refuse to get a real job with consistent hours." "That's not why we're having this chat," Julian interjected. My brother, the golden child. He was leaning against the mantel, swirling his own drink, looking like he had just stepped out of a catalog for yacht owners. "Let Dad finish, Liv, it's important." I looked at Julian. He was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just scented blood in the water. Beside him stood his wife, Sophie, who was scrolling on her phone, barely suppressing a smirk. "As I was saying," William continued, clearing his throat loudly to regain command of the room, "your mother and I have been doing some estate planning. With the market being what it is, and my retirement approaching, we have to be pragmatic about the future of the company and the family assets." I nodded slowly. "Okay." "We've made a decision," William said, his eyes locking onto mine with a cold, detached finality. "Effective immediately, I am transferring the majority ownership of the firm to Julian. He will be named CEO next month." That wasn't surprising. Julian had been groomed for the throne since birth, despite having the business acumen of a wet paper towel. "Congratulations, Julian," I said automatically. "There's more," Megan added, her voice light and airy, as if she were discussing the weather. "Since Julian will be shouldering the burden of the family legacy, we felt it was only fair that the assets reflect that responsibility. We've signed over the deed to the city condo to him and Sophie, and the lake house." My stomach dropped. "The condo? But you told me last year that if I ever needed a place to stay while the startup got off the ground, the condo was available." "Plans change," William said sharply. "And frankly, Olivia, we can't keep enabling this hobby of yours. It's been 5 years. You have nothing to show for it but dark circles under your eyes and a mountain of debt. We're doing this for your own good." "We're cutting you off," Julian clarified, his grin widening. "From the will, from the trust, from everything. Dad thinks it's the sink or swim moment you need to finally grow up. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just about the money. I had never asked them for cash for the business. I had bootstrapped every cent. But the emotional severance, the absolute clinical cruelty of doing this now, when they thought I was at my lowest, was a physical blow. "So I get nothing," I whispered. "I'm your daughter." "You're a liability," William said, taking a sip of his scotch. "Julian is the future. You are a cautionary tale." The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a diagnosis of my worth in their eyes, and the result was zero. For a moment, the silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down the seconds of my humiliation. Sophie finally broke the silence. She snapped her gum, a habit she only indulged in when she wanted to look bored, and looked me up and down. "Honestly, Liv, it's better this way. Julian and I need the space. We're thinking of expanding the family soon, and that condo is perfect for a nursery. You can't expect Mom and Dad to hold onto prime real estate just because you're playing hacker in a basement somewhere." "I don't live in a basement," I said, my voice steadying despite the tremor in my hands. "I live in a studio." "Same difference," Julian laughed. He walked over to the window and peered out at the driveway. "Hey, come check this out. Since the announcement is official, I figured I could finally bring the new toy around." We all migrated to the window. Parked in the circular driveway, gleaming under the floodlights, was a brand new, slate-gray luxury sports car. It was low, aggressive, and easily worth $150,000. "Company car?" I asked. "Signing bonus," Julian corrected, winking at William. Dad wanted to make sure the new CEO looked the part. You know what they say, Liv, dress for the job you want. Maybe if you bought a nice suit once in a while, investors would take you seriously. "Oh, wait, you don't have investors, do you? Just that little app." I looked at the car, then back at my father. "You bought him a Porsche? You told me last week you couldn't co-sign a lease for a server farm because cash flow was tight." "Cash flow is tight for risky ventures," William said dismissively. "Investments in Julian are a sure thing. He's family. He's loyal. He's here, actually working, not chasing fantasies." I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest, a mix of grief and rage. They truly didn't see me. To them, I was invisible, a ghost haunting their perfect portrait. My mother patted my arm, her touch lacking any real warmth. "Don't be jealous, darling. It's unbecoming. Julian has worked very hard for this." Hard? I nearly choked on the word. Julian came into the office at 11 a.m., took 2-hour lunches, and spent the rest of the day playing golf on the office simulator. I had spent the last 5 years coding 18 hours a day, eating ramen and fixing bugs until my eyes bled. "Let's go to dinner," Megan announced, clapping her hands. "Cook has prepared a lovely turkey. Let's not let Olivia's mood spoil the celebration." As we walked toward the dining room, I lagged behind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked, another thing they had laughed at earlier, but the notification center was glowing. 17:45 p.m. 15 minutes. I had 15 minutes until the embargo lifted. 15 minutes until the press release hit the wires. 15 minutes until the reality they thought they controlled shattered into a million pieces. I looked at Julian's back as he strutted into the dining room, his arm draped possessively over Sophie. He thought he had won. He thought he had taken everything from me, my inheritance, my parents' respect, my safety net. I took a deep breath, smoothing the frayed cuff of my blazer. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They measured success by what was given to them. I measured it by what I built. And I had built something they couldn't even comprehend. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and followed them into the dining room. "I'm coming," I said softly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The dining room was opulent, centered around a table long enough to seat 20, though it was set only for 5. The centerpiece was an absurd arrangement of autumn flowers and gilded pumpkins that probably cost more than my monthly server fees. I took my usual seat at the far end, away from the head of the table where William sat like a king holding court. Julian sat to his right, the seat of honor. As the soup was served, my mind drifted back to the beginning. 5 years ago, I had come to William with a pitch deck. I was 24, fresh out of a master's program, eyes bright with an idea that could revolutionize data compression for mobile streaming. I hadn't asked for a handout. I had asked for a seed investment, a business loan with interest. I remembered the way William had laughed, not a chuckle but a belly laugh. He had thrown the pitch deck across the desk. Data compression? Olivia, leave the tech to the boys in Silicon Valley. You're a Williams. We do real estate and logistics. This is a toy, a useless toy. That rejection had been the fuel. I moved out the next day. I sold my jewelry, my car, and my designer clothes. I learned to code the backend. Myself because I couldn't afford a CTO. I lived on 4 hours of sleep. I missed Christmas, birthdays, and vacations. And through it all, there was Julian. Julian, who failed the bar exam twice and was immediately handed a VP title. Julian, who crashed 3 cars in college, all of which were quietly replaced by Daddy. Across the table, Julian was currently holding court, gesturing with a silver spoon. He was a handsome man, I had to admit, with the kind of polished, symmetrical face that politicians paid surgeons for, but his eyes were empty. There was no curiosity in them, only an endless hunger for validation. So, Julian said, turning his gaze on me as he buttered a roll. What is it called again? The app. He said the word app like it was a dirty tissue. It's called Streamline, I said quietly, focusing on my soup. Right, Streamline, Sophie giggled. Sounds like a diet pill. It's an algorithmic optimization tool for high-bandwidth data transfer, I recited, the pitch coming automatically. Boring, Julian sang out, making Megan chuckle. Liv, seriously. When are you going to give it up? You're almost 30, you're single, you're broke. It's embarrassing for the family. People ask me, Julian, what does your sister do? And I have to say, oh, she's finding herself. It makes us look bad. He's right, Olivia, William grunted. I had to pull strings to get Julian into the country club. We can't have you showing up there in whatever this is you're wearing. I don't care about the country club, Dad, I said. That's the problem. William slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. You have no ambition, you have no drive. You're content to wallow in mediocrity while your brother is out there conquering the world. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Julian hadn't conquered anything. He had been carried to the summit in a sedan chair. I have ambition, I said, my voice low. Show me, Julian challenged, leaning forward. His face twisted into a sneer that revealed the bully beneath the suit. Show me one thing you've achieved in 5 years, $1 of profit, one asset, one thing that proves you aren't just a leech on society's patience. He took a sip of wine, his eyes gleaming with malice. I just closed a deal for the downtown high-rise, Olivia, $30 million. What did you do today? Fix a typo. He didn't know. He couldn't see past his own reflection. He saw a tired woman in a cheap blazer. He didn't see the predator waiting to strike. He didn't see that the typo I fixed 5 years ago was now the foundational code for half the streaming services in the hemisphere. I looked at the grandfather clock. 17:58 p.m. I didn't fix a typo, Julian, I said, picking up my napkin and dabbing my mouth. I had a meeting. A meeting, Sophie laughed. With who? Your landlord asking for late rent. No, I said, a small, cold smile finally touching my lips. With a team of lawyers. Lawyers? William frowned, sensing a shift in the air. Are you in trouble, Olivia? If you've gotten yourself sued, don't expect me to bail you out. I just told you, the bank of Dad is closed. I don't need a bailout, Dad, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs like a war drum. And they weren't defense attorneys. Then who were they? Julian asked, annoyed that I wasn't crying yet. Mergers and acquisitions, I said clearly. Julian froze. William's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What are you talking about? Julian scoffed, though his voice wavered slightly. Who would acquire your little project? It's worthless. Is it? I asked. I turned my head toward the massive flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace in the adjacent living room. It was currently muted, playing the local evening news loop. Can you turn the volume up, Julian? The 6 o'clock business report is about to start. I think you might find it educational. Julian let out a sharp, barking laugh. He picked up the remote control from the sideboard and pointed it at the television like a weapon. You want to watch the news? He sneered, his thumb hovering over the volume button. What, is there a segment on how to file for bankruptcy? Or maybe fashion tips for the unemployed? Just turn it on, Julian, I said. My voice was no longer raspy. The adrenaline that had been making me shake earlier had calcified into something cold and hard. I felt incredibly still. He rolled his eyes at Sophie, who snickered into her wine glass and pressed the button. The volume bar on the screen climbed, and the room filled with the energetic, urgent theme music of the Channel 6 evening news. The anchor, a woman with severe hair and a bright red blazer, was looking down at her papers. And we'll have the weather in a moment, she said, her voice professional and crisp. But first, a massive breaking story coming out of the downtown tech corridor this evening. A local development thaw. T is sending shockwaves through the financial sector. William frowned, shifting in his chair. The financial sector? I haven't heard anything. Julian, did you hear anything? Probably some zoning change, Julian dismissed, waving a hand. Boring stuff. Actually, the anchor continued, looking directly into the camera, it's a Cinderella story for the digital age. Streamline, a data compression startup based right here in the city, has just announced a full acquisition by global tech giant Omnicorp. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen. Julian's hand, still holding the fork, froze in midair. The deal, the anchor said, emphasizing every syllable, was signed just hours ago and is valued at a staggering $100 million. On the screen, the graphic changed. It wasn't a stock photo of a building, it was a photo of me. It was a headshot from my LinkedIn profile, the only professional photo I had, taken 5 years ago when I still had hope in my eyes. Beside my face, in bold, impact font, were the words, $100 million deal. The founder, the anchor went on, 29-year-old Olivia Williams, developed the proprietary algorithm entirely on her own, reportedly working out of a studio apartment for the last 5 years. Analysts are calling it the most significant solo founder exit in the state's history. The camera cut to B-roll footage. It showed the exterior of the Omnicorp headquarters, then a clip of the Omnicorp CEO shaking hands with me. We had filmed it 3 hours ago. I was wearing the same frayed blazer I was wearing right now. In the clip, I looked tired, yes, but I was smiling, a genuine, relieved smile that made my eyes crinkle at the corners. Ms. Williams could not be reached for further comment this evening, the anchor concluded, as she is reportedly celebrating privately with family. A well-deserved celebration for the city's newest centimillionaire. Julian slowly lowered the remote. His face had gone the color of old ash. He looked from the TV screen, where my face was still lingering in the corner graphic, to me, sitting 5 feet away from him. He looked at my frayed cuffs. He looked at my messy bun. He looked at the cracked phone on the table. Is that, Sophie's voice was a high-pitched squeak. She pointed a manicured finger at the TV. Is that a joke? Is this a deep fake? It's not a joke, I said. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. The water tasted cool and clean. And it's not a deep fake. The deal closed at 4:00 p.m. The wire transfer hits my account on Monday morning. William hadn't moved. He was staring at the TV with his mouth slightly open, a piece of roast turkey forgotten on his plate. The arrogance that usually radiated from him like heat from a furnace had vanished, replaced by a bewildered, terrifying void. 100, William whispered. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Million, I finished for him. Give or take a few million for taxes and legal fees. But yes, the useless toy turned out to be quite valuable. I watched them process it. I watched the gears in Julian's head grind to a halt and then frantically try to spin in reverse. I saw the moment the realization hit him. The car in the driveway, the condo, the CEO title, it was all allowance money. It was crumbs. I had just bought the bakery. The silence broke like a dam bursting. You lied, Julian shouted, slamming his hand down on the table. The silverware jumped again, clattering against the fine china. You sat there and let us talk like that. You set us up. I didn't say a word, Julian, I replied calmly, cutting a piece of my turkey. You were the one doing all the talking. You and Dad, I just listened. This is impossible, William stammered, his face flushing a deep, dangerous red. He pulled out his phone, his thick fingers fumbling over the screen. A deal that size, I would have heard. The grapevine, I know everyone at OmniCorp. You know the board members, Dad, I corrected him. You play golf with the old guard, you don't know the tech acquisition team. They don't play golf, they write checks. Suddenly, William's phone began to ring. Then it pinged. Then it buzzed. A cascade of notifications lit up the screen. He stared at it. It's Johnson and Miller and, good Lord, the senator. They're calling to congratulate you, I said, taking a bite of the turkey. It was dry. They assume, naturally, that the Williams family is celebrating this together. They assume you're proud. Megan, who had been frozen with her hand to her throat, suddenly gasped. The shock in her eyes was rapidly being replaced by a frantic, calculating gleam. She looked at Julian, then at the expensive car visible through the window, and then at me. Olivia, darling, she breathed, her voice taking on a trembling, theatrical quality. Is it tea? Rue, truly, 100 million. Yes, Mom. Oh my God, Sophie exhaled, her eyes widening as she did the math. She turned to Julian, her expression shifting from adoration to sudden, sharp scrutiny. Julian, that's more than the entire valuation of your dad's firm, isn't it? Julian flinched as if she'd slapped him. Shut up, Sophie. Don't speak to your wife like that, I said sharply. She's right, it is more than the firm's valuation, by a factor of 3 last I checked. You checked, William looked up from his exploding phone, his eyes narrowing. You've been auditing us. I know how to read a balance sheet, Dad. I know the logistics industry is down. I know the firm has been bleeding cash for 6 quarters. That's why you're restructuring and giving the company to Julian, isn't it? You're not retiring, you're bailing out. You're handing him the captain's hat on a sinking ship. The room went quiet again. Julian looked at William, betrayal dawning on his face. Dad, what is she talking about? William waved a hand dismissively, but he wouldn't meet Julian's eye. Business fluctuates, son. Don't listen to her. She's delirious with luck. Luck, I set my knife and fork down. 5 years, Dad. 5 years of 18-hour days. I built the architecture from scratch. I filed the patents myself because you wouldn't lend me the money for a lawyer. I slept on a mattress on the floor so I could afford server space. Luck had nothing to do with it. We were trying to toughen you up, William roared, finally finding his footing in anger. And look, it worked. You think you would have done this if we had coddled you, if we had given you everything like... He stopped, catching himself. Like Julian, I offered. Go on, say it. We gave you the drive, Megan interjected, reaching across the table to try and touch my hand. I pulled it back. Oliva, sweetie, don't you see? This was our plan all along. We knew you had it in you. We just needed to light a fire. Is that what you call it? I asked, looking at her perfectly manicured nails. Lighting a fire? Because 10 minutes ago you called me a liability. You cut me out of the will. You laughed at me. That was banter, Julian said, his laugh sounding forced and hysterical. Come on, Liv, you know how we are. We're a family. We roast each other. It's what we do. But deep down, we're a team. He stood up and walked around the table, grabbing the wine bottle. He moved to pour some into my glass, but his hand was shaking so badly, he spilled a few drops on the white tablecloth. "Here," Julian said, his voice trembling with a desperate, cloying warmth. "A toast to the family's success, to our success. I mean, wow, 100 mil. Think of what we can do with that. We can finally modernize the fleet, Dad. We can pay off the—" He stopped again. "Pay off what, Julian?" I asked softly. He swallowed hard. "Just investments, you know." I looked at him, really looked at him. Behind the expensive suit and the spray tan, I saw a terrified little boy who had never been told no and was terrified of the dark. But I also saw the man who had mocked my poverty for half a decade. "There is no we, Julian," I said. The air in the room shifted from shock to hostility. The predator was realizing the prey had teeth. "Now, Olivia, let's not be rash," William said, his voice dropping to that low, authoritative baritone he used in boardrooms to bully suppliers. He pushed his plate away and clasped his hands on the table. "You've come into a great deal of money. That is a dangerous thing for a young woman with no financial experience." "I managed a startup with zero budget for 5 years," I said. "I think I can manage a bank account." "It's not just a bank account," William lectured, his confidence returning as he retreated into his role as the patriarch. "It's tax liability, it's asset protection, it's wealth management. You are out of your depth. Luckily, you have us, you have the firm." He gestured around the room. "The structure is already in place. We will set up a family trust. I will act as the executor naturally to guide the investments. Julian can handle the day-to-day operations of the capital through the firm. It will bolster our balance sheet, restore confidence in the Williams name, and ensure you are taken care of for life. We'll give you a stipend, a generous one. You can finally buy a decent wardrobe." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to absorb my victory before the ink was even dry. He wanted to take my $100 million to plug the holes in his failing company and prop up Julian's ego. "A stipend," I repeated flatly. "An allowance," Julian corrected, perking up. "Like mine, it's great, Liv. You don't have to worry about bills. The accountants handle everything." "And the condo?" I asked, looking at Sophie. "Do I get the condo back in this arrangement?" Sophie clutched her pearls. "Well, we've already started measuring for drapes. Maybe we can find you something nice nearby? A loft." I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "You aren't listening," I said. "I don't want a loft, and I don't want an allowance." "Don't be difficult," Megan snapped, her mask slipping. "Your father knows best. You're good with computers, fine, but money, real money, that's a man's world, Olivia. You'll lose it all in a year if you don't let William handle it." "I already have financial representation," I said, "and legal." William narrowed his eyes. Who could you possibly have hired that I don't know?" "Remember how you said I was playing CEO?" I asked Julian. "Well, CEOs have networks. My lead counsel is firm of Sterling, Cooper, and Davis." William went pale. "Davis, you have Arthur Davis." "He was very interested in my case," I said, "especially when I told him about the trust." The trust," William's voice cracked. "Grandmother's trust," I said. "The one she left for both of us, Julian. The one Dad has been managing." Julian looked confused. "What about it? I get my distribution every month." "Yes," I said, "you do, but I haven't received a statement in 4 years. Dad told me the market was down and my portion was underperforming. He told me there was no liquidity." I turned my gaze to William, who was now sweating profusely. "But that wasn't true, was it, Dad? Because Arthur Davis did a little digging. It turns out you drained my side of the trust to cover Julian's gambling debts in Vegas 3 years ago, and to pay for the settlement on that hit-and-run Julian had in college." Sophie gasped. "Gambling debts, hit-and-run?" She turned to Julian. "You told me you were volunteering in South America that summer." Julian stammered, his face turning a mottled purple. "It wasn't. Dad said he handled it." "He did handle it," I said. "With my money, my inheritance. You stole from me, Dad. You embezzled from one child to save the other. It was a loan, William shouted, slamming his fist on the table. A bridge loan. I intended to pay it back. With what? I asked. The company is insolvent. I know about the audit, Dad. I know the bank is calling the loans on the warehouse district next month. You're broke. That's why you invited me here. You weren't just cutting me off to be cruel. You were cutting me off because there's nothing left to give. You gave it all to Julian, and he wasted it. The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The facade of the wealthy, perfect Williams family dissolved. All that was left were 3 desperate people in a mortgaged mansion and the daughter they had underestimated. So, I stood up, smoothing my blazer. Here is how this is going to work. I'm not bailing out the company. I'm not paying off the warehouse loans. And I'm certainly not funding a nursery in a condo that was bought with stolen funds. You can't do this, Megan sobbed, tears finally streaming down her face, tears of fear, not sorrow. We're your family, what will people say? They'll say, I replied, grabbing my purse, that the Williams family legacy is finally in competent hands. Just not yours. Where are you going? Julian demanded, standing up to block my path. He looked dangerous now, desperate and cornered. You can't just leave. We have to fix this. You owe us. I owe you? I stepped closer to him. I was shorter than him, but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. I owe you for the years of mockery, for the isolation, for making me feel small so you could feel big. I'm your brother. Then act like it, I said. Get out of my way, Julian, or I call Arthur Davis and tell him to file the embezzlement charges against Dad tomorrow morning. And given your signature is on the fraudulent withdrawal forms, I imagine you'd be named as a co-conspirator. Julian froze. His eyes darted to William, who was sitting with his head in his hands, defeated. Julian stepped aside. I didn't sleep that night. I checked into a hotel downtown, the kind of place with high thread counts and soundproof walls, a far cry from my studio apartment. But I didn't stay there to sleep. I stayed there to strategize. My phone had been buzzing nonstop, not just from well-wishers, but from my father. 17 missed calls. 12 voicemails. A string of text messages ranging from pleading, Oliva, please, we need to present a united front, to threatening, you are destroying this family. He was desperate, and desperate men do foolish things. The next morning, I found out exactly what foolish thing he had decided on. I was drinking coffee and watching the business news when a breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Live, Williams Logistics CEO announces strategic partnership with tech unicorn. I nearly dropped my mug. The screen cut to a live feed of the atrium in my father's office building. A podium had been hastily set up, Flan. Ked by the Williams Logistics logo, and audaciously, a blown-up printout of my Streamline logo. Williams stood at the microphone, looking grave but authoritative. Julian was beside him, wearing a fresh suit, trying to look like a visionary executive rather than a man who had gambled away his sister's inheritance. We are incredibly proud, William was saying to the gaggle of assembled reporters and cameras, to announce that the acquisition of Streamline is not just a victory for my daughter, but a victory for the Williams Group. As the incubator of this technology, Williams Logistics will be integrating Olivia's algorithms into our global fleet, securing our dominance for the next decade. Furthermore, Julian Williams, our incoming CEO, will be stepping in as a strategic advisor to manage the transition of these assets. It was a lie, a bold, public, market-manipulating lie designed to pump his company's plummeting stock price and attach his sinking anchor to my rising star. He was betting that I wouldn't embarrass him on live television. He was betting that the good daughter would grit her teeth and play along to save the family name. He had bet wrong. I grabbed my coat. I didn't call a car. I called Arthur Davis. Meet me at the Williams building, I told him, and bring the cease and desist. We're doing this live. 20 minutes later, I walked through the revolving doors of the building I had been banned from entering without an appointment for 5 years. The security guard, Old Mr. Henderson looked up, startled. He saw the look on my face and simply buzzed me through. The atrium was crowded. Camera flashes were popping like strobe lights. William was midway through a Q&A session, answering a question about synergy. Yes, well, Olivia and Julian have always worked closely, William lied smoothly. It's a brother-sister dynamism. He provided the business acumen, she provided the code. It's a 50-50 split in spirit, if not on paper. Actually, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the marble floor. The room fell silent. The reporters turned. Cameras swiveled. The sea of suits parted as I walked down the center aisle. I wasn't wearing a power suit. I was wearing jeans and a leather jacket, looking every bit the tech disruptor I was. William froze. Julian looked like he might vomit. Olivia, William said, his smile stretching into a rictus of panic. We were just telling the press about the good news. Come up here, sweetheart, join your brother. He gestured frantically to the spot next to him, trying to physically pull me into his narrative. I walked up the steps to the stage, but I didn't stand next to him. I walked past him and took the microphone from his hand. I'm sorry to interrupt, I said into the mic, my voice calm, amplified, echoing off the glass walls. But I need to issue a correction, a significant one. Oliva, don't, Julian hissed from behind me. Don't do this. I ignored him. I looked directly into the camera lens of the primary news network. My name is Olivia Williams, founder and sole owner of Streamline, I began. And I want to make one thing perfectly clear to the market, to the shareholders of Williams Logistics, and to the public. There is no partnership, there is no synergy, and there is absolutely no involvement from the Williams Group in my company. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reporters began shouting questions. Ms. Williams, your father just said. My father is mistaken, I cut in. Streamline was built independently, without a single dollar of support from this firm or this family. In fact, it was built in spite of them. I turned to look at William. He was trembling, his face a mask of horror. He knew what was coming. He knew I held the nuclear codes. Furthermore, I continued, addressing the investors directly now, any claim that Julian Williams had a hand in my success is fraudulent. Julian Williams has no executive capacity in my firm, and given the current financial state of Williams Logistics, which I'm sure the SEC will be interested in reviewing regarding the misappropriation of family trust funds, I would strongly advise against anyone viewing this transition of power as a positive indicator. The room erupted. Misappropriation, SEC, the journalist smelled blood. You ungrateful witch, Julian screamed, losing all control. He lunged toward me, his carefully crafted persona shattering instantly. I'm the CEO, I'm the... He was intercepted by Arthur Davis, who had stepped onto the stage with two large security officers. Arthur handed a thick envelope to William. Mr. Williams, Arthur said, his voice carrying over the commotion. You are served. We are filing for immediate forensic accounting of the Williams Family Trust and freezing all associated assets pending an investigation into embezzlement. Flashbulbs exploded. The image of the golden child, screaming, red-faced while his father clutched a lasso. It was broadcast live to the entire city. But the most important moment happened offstage. I looked down into the front row of the reserved seating. Sophie was sitting there, dressed in a Chanel suit, her face pale. She was staring at Julian. She had heard the words misappropriation and trust funds. She saw her husband not as the powerful heir, but as a liar who had stolen from his own sister to cover up his failures. Julian, realizing the cameras were on him, tried to pivot. Sophie, baby, tell them we're a team. Sophie stood up. She looked at the screaming man on stage, then she looked at me. Our eyes met. For years, she had joined in the mockery. She had laughed at my clothes, my car, my life. But she was also a woman who had been sold a lie about her financial security. Sophie didn't speak. She simply reached up, unclasped the diamond necklace Julian had given her, bought, I now knew, with my money, and dropped it onto the chair. Then, she turned around and walked out of the atrium, the click-clack of her heels cutting through the chaos. "Sophie," Julian wailed. It was over, the facade had crumbled. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. By Monday, Williams Logistics was in a trading halt. The stock had cratered by 60% following my press conference and the subsequent rumors of fraud. The board of directors, terrified of liability, voted unanimously to remove William as chairman and fired Julian before he even officially took the CEO seat. The investigation that followed was like peeling back the layers of a rotten onion. The forensic accountants found everything. The gambling debts, the hush money for the hit and run, the creative accounting used to hide the company's losses. It wasn't just mismanagement, it was criminal negligence. William was facing indictment. His reputation, the only currency he truly cared about, was bankrupt. He spent his days in the mansion, which was now up for foreclosure, yelling at lawyers who eventually stopped answering his calls. Julian fared worse. Without his father's protection or money, his friends evaporated. His car was repossessed. The city condo was seized to pay back the trust. He was left with nothing but his ego, which was a poor currency in the real world. 2 weeks after the press conference, I was in my new office. It was a beautiful space, an entire floor of a glass tower overlooking the harbor. The sun was streaming in, illuminating the sleek, modern furniture. I was no longer eating instant noodles. I was reviewing philanthropic grants for a new initiative I was launching to fund female tech founders. My assistant buzzed me. "Ms. Williams, there's Mrs. Sophie Williams here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. Should I send her away?" I hesitated. "No, send her in." The door opened and Sophie walked in. She looked different. The heavy makeup was gone, her hair was pulled back simply, and she was wearing jeans and a sweater. She looked younger, but also more tired. She was carrying a box. "Hi, Olivia," she said, her voice small. "Sophie," I said, gesturing to a chair. "Have a seat." She remained standing. "I won't take long, I wanted to return this." She placed the box on my desk. Inside was a collection of jewelry, earrings, a bracelet, a watch. I had them appraised. They were bought during the months Julian withdrew from your trust. They aren't mine, they're yours. I looked at the jewelry. "I don't want them, Sophie." "Please," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't keep them. I filed for divorce yesterday." I nodded. I heard. "I wanted to apologize," she continued, her voice trembling. "For everything, for the Thanksgiving dinners, for the jokes. I was so insecure. I thought if I played along with them, I'd be safe. I thought I was part of the winning team. I didn't realize I was just another prop." She looked down at her hands. "You were the only honest person in that house, Olivia, and we treated you the worst. I am so sorry." I looked at her. I saw the regret. It was genuine. She had been a participant in my pain, yes, but she had also been a victim of their manipulation. "Keep the jewelry, Sophie," I said softly. She looked up startled. "What? No, Sell it," I said. "Use the money for a lawyer. Use it for a deposit on an apartment. Start over. But do it on your own terms this time. Don't rely on a man to give you value." Sophie stared at me, tears spilling over. "Why, after everything I said?" "Because," I said, standing up and walking to the window to look out at the city that was now, in many ways, mine. "The best revenge isn't cruelty. It's success. And part of my success is having the power to show grace where it wasn't shown to me." She nodded, wiping her face. "Thank you, Olivia. You're a better woman than I am." "I'm just a busy one," I smiled. "I have a company to run." She left, and for the first time. In my life, I didn't feel the weight of my family pressing down on me. I didn't feel the need to prove them wrong anymore. I had already done that. Now, I just had to prove myself right. I picked up my phone. I had a meeting with the architectural team for the new Streamline campus. I was building something real, something lasting. And I was doing it as Olivia Williams, not the daughter, not the sister, not the failure, just me. And that was worth more than $100 million.